The conference room buzzed with quiet murmurs as representatives from across the galaxy assembled. Alien species of varying shapes, sizes, and temperaments filled the room, eyes fixed on the central display screen. On it was a live feed from Earth, where the humans had made a bold request, a demonstration of their mastery over dangerous creatures, led by their mysterious asset, John Burke. "Let's not waste time," said the Zernak ambassador, a tall, lean figure covered in pale, mottled skin, his voice a low growl. "We've heard the stories of your so-called Deathworlder, but we are here to see the truth. If humans are so capable of taming predators, let them prove it." His sharp, amber eyes glowed with malice. His people had ruled the galaxy's wilds for centuries, their primal strength unrivaled by any other species. A human, a mere hairless primate, couldn't possibly control the forces of nature as they could. The room quieted as Burke stepped into the arena, a vast, high-tech chamber designed to showcase the ultimate test of survival. Massive walls, reinforced by energy shields, surrounded the pit where he would face the Zernak's greatest challenge. The beast they had selected to fight him was the Zernak leader, an imposing figure nearly 7 meters tall, its skin a thick, armored hide, with talons capable of ripping through steel. Its eyes, glowing with predatory hunger, locked onto Burke. The audience, both alien and human, leaned forward. The Zernak ambassador gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, signaling for the battle to begin. Burke didn't flinch. He walked slowly into the center of the pit, eyes never leaving the massive predator before him. The Zernak beast let out a guttural roar, sending vibrations through the air as it lunged toward its prey. The humans in the stands held their breath. They were used to seeing their soldiers fight, but never like this. Never with a creature this powerful. It wasn't just strength that defined the Zernak. It was instinct, an ancient, unrelenting drive to dominate. And in the face of that overwhelming power, Burke seemed almost calm. Too calm. The beast struck with lightning speed, its talons flashing toward Burke's chest, ready to rip him apart. Burke shifted to the side in an almost fluid motion, narrowly avoiding the claws. The crowd gasped. It wasn't the speed or strength that impressed them. It was the fact that Burke hadn't broken a sweat. He hadn't even seemed alarmed. With a quick flick of his wrist, Burke made a subtle motion. To the surprise of everyone, the beast paused mid-attack, its body suddenly stiffening. Its glowing eyes flickered as if confused, its natural instincts suddenly clouded. Burke spoke softly, his voice barely a whisper, but it carried an undeniable authority. "Calm." The beast hesitated, its massive chest rising and falling with confused breaths. For a moment, it was as if the world had frozen, and the Zernak leader was not the ferocious, untamable creature it was known to be. It was a wild animal, tamed. The alien spectators exchanged bewildered glances. The Zernak ambassador's eyes narrowed. This wasn't just control. It was mastery. Burke had done what no one thought possible. Another flick of his wrist, and the beast's posture changed completely. It lowered itself to the ground, its enormous head bowed in submission, its dangerous claws now mere extensions of its sheer physical power, but utterly still. "This is how we tame predators," Burke said, his voice carrying throughout the arena. "With patience, understanding, and absolute control." The silence in the room was deafening. The message was clear. The humans weren't just survivors. They were the masters of survival itself. The Zernak ambassador, for the first time in centuries, felt a chill run through his blood. He had just witnessed the impossible. A human had done the unthinkable. The room remained deathly silent as Burke stood in the center of the arena, the Zernak leader kneeling before him like an obedient dog. The alien spectators, once so certain of their own species' dominance, were now utterly stunned. No one moved, no one breathed. As the realization slowly began to sink in, humanity was no longer the helpless, primitive species they had been led to believe. Burke's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the spectacle around him. He turned toward the alien dignitaries in the stands, his voice steady and confident. "I didn't just control the beast," he said, almost as if explaining a simple lesson. "I made it understand that it didn't need to fight. That's how humans survive. By understanding what makes others tick, by knowing how to communicate with the wild, not through brute force, but through insight." The Zernak ambassador, still seated, clenched his fists tightly, his sharp claws digging into the armrest of his seat. His glowing amber eyes flickered with barely contained rage, his lips curling back to reveal rows of serrated teeth. This was not how it was supposed to happen. The Zernak were not supposed to bow to anyone, let alone a human. His pride, no, his species' pride, was shattered. "You dare!" the ambassador began, his voice a growl of fury. But before he could finish, Burke turned, raising a hand to silence him. His gaze remained fixed on the Zernak leader, who was still kneeling at his feet. "Do not mistake control for weakness," he said calmly. "You're the predator here, but I am your superior. I've seen far worse than you." The tension in the room became palpable. Burke's words were not just directed at the Zernak leader, but at every alien present. They were a warning, a declaration. Humans weren't just survivors of their hostile homeworld. They were conquerors, capable of bending even the most savage creatures to their will. The Zernak ambassador, unable to hide his rage, stood up abruptly. His species' sense of honor and superiority demanded action, and Burke's challenge had pushed him to the brink. He glanced at the Zernak leader in the pit, now subdued and trembling beneath Burke's influence, and made a swift, calculated decision. "You claim control," the ambassador spat, his voice dripping with venom. "Then prove it. Fight him. Show us that your mastery isn't just a game." The room fell into a hushed murmur as all eyes turned to Burke. The Zernak ambassador's challenge hung in the air, and for the first time, Burke's calm demeanor faltered. He knew what was coming, and it wouldn't be a test of strength. It would be something far more dangerous. Burke glanced at the ambassador, then at the submissive beast still kneeling before him. Slowly, he cracked a smile, a predator's grin. "I didn't come here to fight," Burke replied, his tone low, dangerous. "But if you insist, I'll show you how truly pointless it is." The Zernak ambassador growled in frustration. "Very well," he snapped, signaling to his guards. A roar echoed from the gates as they unleashed another Zernak, a ferocious young challenger, into the arena. The crowd gasped as the beast charged at Burke, its eyes burning with bloodlust. But Burke stood his ground, his body coiled like a spring, waiting. The game had just changed. Now, he would show them what true control looked like, not in a battle of strength, but in a battle of wits. Burke would bend this predator to his will, just as he had done with the first. And when the Zernak realized they could not outwit him, their fear would be more powerful than any weapon they possessed. The arena quieted once more as Burke and the Zernak leader's young challenger faced off. The creature, more agile and ferocious than its elder, was a blur of muscle and fury as it charged toward Burke. It was a beast of instinct, raw, untamed, and bloodthirsty. But Burke didn't move. He didn't even flinch. The creature lunged with blinding speed, its claws aimed directly for Burke's throat. At the last possible moment, Burke sidestepped, the movement so precise it seemed almost unnatural. The young Zernak stumbled forward, crashing into the ground with a violent roar. Without hesitation, Burke closed the distance between them, his eyes cold and calculating. The crowd's breath caught in unison. This was no fight, it was a dance. Burke's every motion was controlled, every step deliberate, as if he had orchestrated the entire encounter from the very beginning. "Sit," Burke commanded, his voice steady. For a split second, the beast hesitated. Then, impossibly, it obeyed. The challenger's massive form froze mid-swipe, its eyes now dull, its vicious snarls fading into a confused whimper. The young Zernak lowered its head, and with great reluctance sank to the ground. Burke's presence was a command the creature could not resist, and in that moment, the entire arena fell into stunned silence. The Zernak ambassador's face twisted into an expression of both disbelief and fury. The predator species, who ruled the wilderness of the galaxy, had been humbled by a single human. And it wasn't just about physical power, it was control, something the Zernak had always believed was their domain alone. The reality was sinking in. Burke had done the unthinkable. He had not only survived, he had bent the beast to his will. Enough, the Zernak ambassador snarled, turning toward his aides. This humiliation ends now. But Burke wasn't done. With a final glance at the subdued creature, he looked at the ambassador, his tone unwavering. If you think I've proven nothing, then perhaps you'd like to send your finest challenge against me. But you should know, your species has no monopoly on control. The ambassador's fists clenched. You believe your control over animals makes you fit to lead. He sneered. You understand nothing of power, human. You cannot comprehend what it means to truly rule. But Burke's expression remained unchanged. He knew what was coming. The Zernak had underestimated him, but they would soon realize their mistake. Control over a predator wasn't about brute force or ancient instincts. It was about understanding the balance of nature, the psychology of survival. Burke had seen it all on Earth, in the wilds, where beasts far more dangerous than any alien could imagine roamed freely. He had tamed them. And now he was doing the same with the galaxy's most fearsome predators. In the shadows, though, something darker was stirring. The Zernak ambassador's humiliation was just the beginning. As he stewed with rage, far more dangerous forces were beginning to conspire. Forces that would stop at nothing to erase the human anomaly that had dared to challenge the natural order. In the heart of the galaxy, the storm was brewing. Burke had just proven humanity's dominance over the wild, but the real test was coming. The predators of the universe would soon unite, and they would not go down without a fight. Burke would soon discover that while he had tamed their beasts, he had also awakened a much darker, far more dangerous side of galactic politics. The galaxy was never the same after Burke's demonstration. His name spread like wildfire, whispered in awe and fear across every corner of the universe. For many, Burke was a symbol of humanity's unparalleled control over the wildest, most dangerous creatures imaginable. For others, he was a threat, a challenge to the very foundation of the galactic balance. It didn't take long for the predator factions to unite in response. For centuries, they had ruled the galaxy's wildernesses, from the jungle worlds of the Centaurians to the dark, cavernous depths of the crags, where the Shaktai hunted in packs. They were creatures of instinct and violence, their superiority written into their DNA. But Burke had shown them that even the deadliest of beasts could be controlled, and that left them terrified. The first attack came without warning. A massive fleet of heavily armored Centaurian warships descended upon a human colony on the distant planet of Elysium, nestled on the edge of the frontier. The Centaurians, known for their savage hunting prowess, had long considered the planet their domain, their sacred hunting grounds. They'd tolerated humanity's presence as long as Earth had kept its distance. But now, with Burke's display fresh in their minds, they saw only a challenge to their authority. The Centaurian ships released a horde of engineered creatures, monstrous beasts designed for war, with thick fur and razor-sharp claws, capable of tearing through steel. The creatures' roars reverberated across the battlefield as they descended upon the colony, a tidal wave of flesh and fury. Burke was ready. He knew this day would come, though perhaps not so soon. The human military had been preparing, but their enemies had vastly underestimated humanity's tactics. Burke himself had handpicked a team of soldiers, a mix of elite fighters, scientists, and animal handlers, ready to face the coming storm. When the Centaurian forces landed, Burke was already there, waiting in the heart of the battlefield. He wasn't leading from the rear. He was in the thick of it, surrounded by a unit of humans and their own tamed beasts. Giant, armored felines, swift, insectoid creatures, and massive, wolf-like beasts that had once roamed Earth's wilds before being genetically altered to serve humanity's needs. As the first wave of Centaurian creatures charged, Burke stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. He wasn't merely commanding his troops, he was commanding the beasts. With a single sharp whistle, the giant felines lunged into the fray, their claws ripping through the Centaurian war beasts. Burke's strategy was simple: control the battlefield by using the predators as instruments of war. Each of his creatures, though terrifying in its own right, was tempered by Burke's iron grip, minds bent not on destruction, but on tactical precision. The Centaurians were stunned. They had underestimated Burke and his understanding of their species' weaknesses. As their beasts were systematically torn apart, they sent in more soldiers, hoping to overwhelm the human forces. But Burke's team had anticipated every move, every tactic. The Centaurians were forced to adapt quickly, realizing they were losing a battle they had thought would be their victory. And then, from the shadows of the battlefield, the true danger emerged. A massive, black-furred Centaurian warlord, known only as Esarath, descended upon the chaos. This beast was the apex of their genetic engineering, a terrifying amalgamation of speed, strength, and intelligence. Its size alone was enough to instill terror in any being. It was a creature that had never been defeated. Until now. Burke's eyes locked onto the warlord. The challenge had escalated. Burke knew he wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting to send a message. And this battle was far from over. The Centaurian warlord, Esarath, was a creature of legend, a monster that had struck fear into the hearts of every species that had ever encountered it. Its black fur rippled like liquid night, its eyes glowing with a cold, predatory intelligence that sent a chill through the air. It was a living weapon, faster, stronger, and more lethal than any creature Burke had ever faced. As Esarath tore through the battlefield, cutting through human soldiers and their tame beasts alike, the entire human force seemed to falter for a moment. Even Burke, usually unflinching in the face of danger, knew this was different. This was not just another predator to tame. Esarath was a king among beasts, a creature that lived by pure instinct and bloodlust. But Burke wasn't intimidated. His eyes never left the massive creature as it rampaged across the field, rending soldiers apart with terrifying precision. He had faced monsters before, both on Earth and beyond, and he knew that brute strength alone wouldn't win this fight. It was about control. It always had been. "Form up," Burke barked, his voice carrying across the chaos. His team of elite soldiers quickly regrouped, setting up defensive lines as Burke's tamed creatures formed a protective perimeter around him. The Centaurians, too, were regrouping, realizing they had underestimated the human forces and their unconventional tactics. Esarath turned its gaze toward Burke, sensing the presence of the one who had orchestrated the human counterattack. With a growl, it charged, its claws carving through the earth as it closed the distance with frightening speed. Burke stood his ground, the chaos around him slowing to a strange, almost surreal pace. He didn't move. He didn't need to. He focused, drawing upon every ounce of his experience, every moment he had spent studying creatures like this. Esarath was a predator, but it was predictable, driven by instincts that were, in the end, no different from those of any other beast. As the warlord lunged, Burke raised his hand. With a sharp command, a large winged creature, one of his tamed allies, a genetically engineered drake, leaped from the shadows and intercepted Esarath mid-strike. The two beasts collided with a deafening crash, but the drake's scales and powerful wings gave it an edge. It battered Esarath back, keeping the warlord at bay. Burke's heart raced, but his mind remained sharp. He wasn't just watching the battle unfold. He was orchestrating it, predicting Esarath's next move. "Now," Burke shouted to his team. A coordinated barrage of energy blasts from human weapons struck the warlord, momentarily stunning it. Sarath let out a roar of frustration, its body rippling with rage as it recovered, shaking off the assault. But Burke wasn't finished. He stepped forward, his voice calm yet commanding. "Sarath, stop." For a heartbeat, there was silence. The warlord, eyes blazing with fury, stopped mid-motion, its massive body tense and trembling. Burke's voice was like a hammer striking a piece of metal, strong and unyielding. "Sarath," Burke said again, this time softer, "you don't need to fight anymore." For the briefest of moments, the warlord's fierce gaze faltered. There was no hesitation in Burke's command, no fear. The creature, for the first time in its existence, paused, its primal instincts struggling to reconcile with the strange, human presence that now commanded it. Then, slowly, as if against its will, Sarath lowered its head, its shoulders sagging in reluctant submission. The battlefield, once filled with screams and chaos, fell into a stunned silence. Burke had done it. He had tamed the untamable. The Centaurians watched in horror. Their warlord, their greatest weapon, was now under the control of a human. A single, fragile human. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Burke had shown the universe that control wasn't about brute force. It was about understanding the essence of what made a predator a predator. And that, above all else, was something the galaxy would never forget. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. Burke stood amidst the wreckage, surrounded by the still form of Sarath and the fallen Centaurian warriors who had fought to the last. The human soldiers, though battered and bruised, stood in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. Burke had done what no one else could. He had bent the Centaurian warlord to his will, and in doing so, he had shattered the Zernak's notion of the galaxy's natural order. But even as the dust settled, the true cost of the conflict began to show itself. The Centaurians, though defeated, were not a species to accept failure. The galaxy had seen them as hunters, yes, but they were also a deeply proud, aggressive people. Their defeat at the hands of a human had only ignited their fury. Burke knew that this would be only the beginning. The Centaurians were already calling for reinforcements from their allies, while whispers of Burke's success spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. In their pride, the Centaurians had underestimated humanity, and now they would stop at nothing to reclaim their lost honor. Burke took a slow breath, stepping forward to stand at the edge of the battlefield. He watched as the Centaurian forces withdrew, their massive ships lifting into the air, the remaining warlord, Sarath, walking like a shadow behind them. It was a symbol of both victory and the dawning realization that Burke's actions had irrevocably altered the balance of power. The predators of the galaxy had been challenged, and some would now see that as a threat. Turning to his soldiers, Burke spoke in a low, commanding tone. "We can't rest on this victory. The Centaurians will be back, and so will the others. They'll be coming for us." One of the soldiers, a seasoned veteran named Captain Olivia Reyes, approached with a grim expression. "They won't just come for us, Burke. They'll come for the whole human race. We've ignited a firestorm." Burke nodded, his eyes narrowing. He had anticipated this. He had known that the galaxy's predators would not take kindly to a single human taming their fiercest champions. But he wasn't afraid. This wasn't about survival. It was about sending a message to the universe. Humanity was no longer just another species among many. They were players, capable of influencing the galaxy's very balance of power. "We're not backing down," Burke said firmly. "We've proven we can control the beasts of this universe. Now we show them we can control the galaxy itself." The human fleet began to regroup, preparing for the inevitable onslaught. But Burke knew that the Centaurians weren't their only problem. There were factions even more dangerous lurking in the shadows. The Shaktai, the crag beasts, and the mysterious Orcs all had their own agendas, and Burke's actions had caught their attention. They would not simply let humanity take its place among the stars without a challenge. As Burke prepared to lead his forces into the next phase of this galactic war, he felt the weight of the universe pressing down on him. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for dominance, and humanity's role in the galaxy would be determined by how they faced the coming storm. The predators had been warned. But now, it was Burke's turn to show the galaxy that it was not just humans who could rule the wild. It was humanity who would tame the galaxy. Burke stood on the bridge of the horizon, watching the stars stretch into streaks of light as the ship moved through the vast emptiness of space. The tension was palpable, a tight knot in his chest that no amount of preparation could dissolve. His victory over the Centaurians had sparked something far bigger than a mere rebellion. It had galvanized the predators of the galaxy, united by their shared desire to reclaim their lost status. The Centaurians were not the only ones coming. Burke knew that a coalition of the galaxy's most dangerous species, the HFY, the crag beasts, and even the Orcs, would soon converge. The predators had their pride, and they were united in the belief that humanity had no place among the stars. To them, Burke was not a conqueror, but an anomaly to be eradicated. A call came through from the War Council. Burke responded, the faces of his top generals flickering onto the holographic display. "We've detected enemy ships entering the system," Captain Rice said, her tone tense. "It's not just one fleet. Multiple factions are mobilizing. They're coming for us." Burke's eyes narrowed. "How long until they arrive?" "We've got 2 days, maybe less. It'll be a full-scale invasion." "Then we don't wait," Burke said firmly. "We're not just going to defend. We're going to show them we won't be intimidated." Rice hesitated, clearly aware of the risks. "You're talking about going on the offensive. That's bold." "It's more than bold. It's necessary. If we let them dictate the terms of this war, we'll never have a chance." It's time they understood that humanity isn't just here to survive. We're here to dominate. The generals exchanged uneasy looks, but none voiced their objections. Burke had already proven he was a man of action, and his confidence in the face of overwhelming odds was infectious. "I want every fleet ready for combat," Burke continued. "We'll meet them head-on, but we won't be fighting alone. I've called in reinforcements, humanity's allies." There were murmurs of confusion. "Who?" Rice asked. "The Sirens, the Ticlair, and yes, even the Calcry. We've made our alliances. Together, we stand a chance." The Sirens were known for their mercenary fleets, ruthless and efficient in battle. The Ticlair, a species of genetically enhanced hunters, had once fought alongside humanity in a war against the Orcs, and the Calcry, a race of nomadic traders, held sway in neutral space, but their respect for Burke's ability to tame the galaxy's wildest predators had earned him their loyalty. Burke's message had spread far and wide. The predators of the galaxy had awakened a sleeping giant, and they had underestimated humanity's ability to forge alliances. Together, they would stand against the oncoming storm. The meeting broke up, and Burke was left alone on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He gazed out at the stars again. But this time, there was no fear in his eyes, only resolve. 2 days. The predators were coming, but they had no idea what was waiting for them. They would learn that humanity's strength wasn't just in their ability to control beasts, it was in their ability to unite. And when the galaxy's most savage forces collided, it would be humanity that showed the predators what true dominance really meant. Burke had tamed the wild. Now he was going to tame the galaxy. Burke stood at the head of his assembled forces on the Horizon's command deck, staring out at the immense swarms of enemy ships filling the space around them. The predators had arrived, each fleet more dangerous than the last, a terrifying convergence of Centaurian warships, HFY hunting fleets, and the heavily armed Orcs cruisers. The tension crackled in the air, but Burke was unfazed. In this moment, everything had come together. His alliances, his training, his vision. Humanity was no longer an underdog. They were the apex. All fleets, ready for engagement. Captain Rice called, her voice a steady presence in the chaos. "We have the advantage of surprise, but we'll need to move fast." Burke nodded. The element of surprise had worked in their favor, but they couldn't rely on it for long. The predators weren't stupid. They'd be ready soon enough. "Deploy the ground forces," Burke commanded, "and prepare our beasts. We need them in the front lines, the way we trained." His plan was simple: use the enemy's natural arrogance against them. The predators had underestimated humanity's ability to control even the wildest beasts. What they didn't realize was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for years, bringing together not only the finest soldiers, but also the deadliest of tamed creatures. Creatures that could strike with deadly precision, as ruthless and efficient as the predators themselves. As the fleets clashed, chaos erupted in space. The human fleet, flanked by their alien allies, engaged the predators head-on, their ships weaving through swarms of missiles and energy blasts. The Centaurians, the Shaktai, and the Orcs fought ferociously, but they were not ready for what came next. From the surface of the nearby planet, Burke's tamed beasts, the massive felines, genetically enhanced wolves, and even the ferocious drakes, charged into battle, cutting through the enemy's ground forces like a hot knife through butter. Each beast was trained for a singular purpose: to strike with deadly efficiency, to overwhelm the predators that believed they were the masters of the galaxy's wilds. Burke himself was no mere spectator. He was on the ground, leading the charge. In his hand, he carried a sword forged from the bones of a long-dead alien beast, a symbol of the war humanity had waged to carve their place among the stars. His presence was like a rallying cry to his troops, a reminder of the strength they had shown, and the strength still to come. The battle raged for hours, but slowly the tides began to turn. The predators, accustomed to their dominance, found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't predict. Burke had done more than tame beasts. He had taught humanity how to use its enemy's arrogance against them. By the end of the day, the predators were retreating. Centaurian warlords, Shaktai hunters, and Orcs marauders scrambled to regroup, but their forces were shattered, their pride broken. Burke's forces had pushed them back, not through brute strength alone, but through strategy, unity, and an understanding of their opponent's weaknesses. On the battlefield, Burke stood over the fallen Centaurian warlord, Srath, who was now kneeling at his feet, subdued but alive. The galaxy had learned something that day. The predators had been shown that their rule over the wilds was nothing compared to the power of humanity's will to dominate and control. Burke looked up at the retreating enemy fleets and then back at his forces. They had won. But it was more than just a victory. It was a statement. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy, not as survivors, but as rulers. Burke said, his voice steady but filled with finality, "The hunt is over." The universe had learned a harsh lesson that day. Humanity wasn't just a species to be hunted or underestimated. Humanity was the apex predator, and the galaxy would never forget it.